Thokozani, I am Pobadimu and I welcome you to my channel. Thank you so much for choosing to view my video. Well, today I'll be talking about spiritual awakening and a spiritual calling. There is a very great difference between the two, and I think that is something most people tend to confuse. That is why today we find such huge numbers of people spiritually confused or misdirected, or people receiving their callings prematurely, or even stuck with their spiritual gifts. So with this video, I aim to shed some light on that and help probably make someone understand better what is happening to themselves, so that you don't find yourself in the trap of thinking I am being called when actually it's just a spiritual awakening. So we are all born into this physical world with our third eye open, and eventually, automatically, when you start to evolve or rather grow as a person, that third eye becomes shut. So now you interlink with the spiritual world because you're spiritual beings, is our dreams. But there comes a certain point in your life, because you're a spiritual person, you need to feed your spirit. So that is when you go through an awakening, and your third eye is eventually opening up, and your spiritual senses are opening up, your auras and all these things in between. So what happens is that at that particular time, you are going through an awakening. Your dreams are going to start not making sense to a certain extent. You'll be dreaming, envisioning things, seeing a lot of things, even to the extent of dreaming of amabai. Well, when it comes to amabai, they are materials that we use in our African spirituality, but they have been identified as something that is used by Abangoma, but I'll just let you in on that. Amabai come in different colors, in symbols, in shapes. They carry different prints on them, because everything we are elements. We are water, we are air, we are fire, we are wind, and all those elements is what we encompass, or rather use, as spiritual people. So now when you see into efana njengamabai, because amabai now come in different colors, that is also meaning good. Colors mean, or rather represent, different energies. For example, you might find you're attracted to a certain bai, probably itawu a yellow, or itawu a red. There's absolutely nothing wrong. That is just energies and colors and representation, or totems or symbols or animals you identify with spiritually, because we are all energies. What you need to understand is that life is spiritual and everything is spiritual. So when it comes to that, people are often caught in the trap of you going through an awakening and you are being told you have a calling. That is why today there is a huge number of people spiritually confused or spiritually lost, not understanding what is going on. Let me tell you, a spiritual awakening is what we all go through. But what differs is what happens at the prime of your spiritual awakening. Because at the prime of your awakening, that is where you get to understand your purpose. And you get to know that, am I being called? And then if you've been called, you go on the other side, but others continue to journey on in their awakening, because we are spiritual people. Because not all of us that have come into this world are going to be spiritual workers, because you need spiritual workers so that they can help the ones in spiritual awakening to always be aligned or shifted in line whenever they feel out of balance and in between. So that is why some people are called and some others are not. But these days, everyone seems to not understand the concept of having a gift. We all have an insight into the spiritual world. That is why upupa. That is why you have deja vus. That is why your body's reacting in certain ways. But what differs is that, do you have a gift or not? And that is where people lose it along the line. Because believe it or not, there are people that have carried out their gifts in belief that I am this person, and actually not. Because you need to understand that an awakening and calling are two different things. A calling deliberately leaves you sick, mentally, emotionally, physically, and all the above. When you're going through a calling, honey, you don't even have time to put on a wig. You don't even have time to wear those lashes. That is when you're receiving a calling, because it's disrupted and you are being called. Because a calling is like death. You are being called on the other side ukuthi uyowela, to connect better namadlozi wakho. So all of that ikwenza ukuthi uhlangahlangane ngokwempilo and all the other things. But now we come back to the spiritual awakening, which also leaves you drained, physically. That is because you're not nurturing yourself spiritually. You're not looking after yourself spiritually. And that is why you will confuse the two and think that actually I'm being called, or rather there's a calling going on in my life. I always say when you're going through an awakening, it's very important to identify and groom yourself spiritually so that you hear what amadlozi wakho are saying. Because that is why you find some people are saying, I have a gift, but amadlozi are not showing me where to go, or amadlozi are not saying anything. Honey, you might just be going through a spiritual awakening. That is why your ancestors are not actually showing you anyway, because everyone is waiting to be shown anyway. But the chosen few are directed, are redirected. That is why these days people have an option now of neo-twasa, because you were told you have a gift, or you're dreaming of snakes and water. Yes, you'll dream of water, because all these elements are things that we carry with us. So, it gets to a point when you ask yourself, if there is so much spiritual workers, who are we going to work on? Because now people are getting lost, or rather lost, because you go see a person, someone who does not necessarily understand things. That's why I say sometimes spirituality needs open-mindedness, because if you do not have that, you get lost on the wayside. So it's important to know that, am I going through an awakening, or am I going through, because when it comes to I went through an awakening since I was 16. And with my awakening, there were things I could identify with that, there's something going wrong. And I only received my calling when I was around about 20, 21, 22, 23, before I actually decided to go, and actually okay, I get you, I feel you. Yes, underground gang, because remember, our work is not just for us, but it's fulfilling the purpose. And unobizo, it means usukubizwa wagini, obe nomsebenzi owedlozi, ne? And then washiya. So now they're passing on the baton to you. That is why, but see, idlozi lakabani, or rather, that is like an agreement we make in the spiritual realm before we even come here. So now people get confused and be like, oh my gosh, am I imperfect? Am I this? Am I this? That is why I say, you might be getting lost in the spiritual awakening, because we are all doing spiritual work. All of us, we see. All of us, we are foreseers, because in a broader aspect, people will say, they are clairvoyants, they are medium, they are all these other people, they are those that lead those to the light and all of that. That is the same thing also with us as spiritual people, or rather gifted people, because we are all spiritual people. There are different aspects, but people become lazy because our African spirituality has been boxed. Listen, it's 2021 and spirituality has evolved. And you might find someone say, I see dead people, and you go get consulted, and like, we sangoma. You don't dig deep into your spiritual lives and understand what is happening. I always say, yes, I present myself nisangoma, but the work I do within my gift, it's not just ubungoma that you see and think it is being isangoma, because even how work is conducted, even how I relate to the spiritual realm is far from ordinary. And that is when we get lost, because when you say, I'm waiting for my people to show me where to go, it is because you need to be redirected to people that are aligned with the type of gift, or rather calling you are receiving. So now, because everyone is being called to be a sangoma, and no, not all of us, and because we are too lazy to dig deep, we think such huge terms are just for certain people of a certain color, it's just prophet, all of this. Listen, we are all seers. We are all we all have different ways. You might find that you're a diviner, you are this, you're a mediator, you all of this, and I just sum up everything and just say, I'm an advocate for amadlozi, and that's where he stands, because my work is to bring people to the light. That is the work I do. My work is just in the light, because that's who I am. So that is why I'm saying you rediscover yourself, especially throughout your spiritual awakening, because it disrupts your life. That is why and now it looks as if siyahlanya, every fifth person, or the ratio to people abatosile is like 10-1. It's because people get lost in that process. Just live life and know that you're a spiritual person and understand. And when the calling comes, You will know and you will see, because that is when umnikazi wendaba will come to you, akunikeze isikhwama, asho ukuthi this is what's happening and you taking over from this. So that is why some people struggle with their gifts, because even in the family, like azange nje kwaba nomuntu onjalo in the family, uyithatha le nto uyithatha because you went through an awakening and you were dreaming of certain clots and all of these things. Remember, we are spiritual people and we always need to nurture our spiritual lives. But we go to spiritual workers, abantu called, to help redirect us uma silahleka or whatever the case might be. That is why sineyibongo ezingafani, because we all stem from different family trees. So it's something that we need to understand, because even when it comes to candles, namapa and all these things, everything, all colors are energies. For example, my color is red. There's some color I identify with amongst all colors. Yes, I do use other colors like yellow, white, blue, not really, but I'm more of a red person. That is my spirit. That is who I am. And I identify more with certain amabai, because that is my spirit and that is why I identify with. So that's what you also need to do as a person, and identify it. It does not necessarily mean mama pupe injiti or tau, now you need kutohambu yotwasa. There's certain things that we relate to as people. That is why gunemi sam yasema kaiwe. So that is why we pray. That is why we go to churches. That is why you feel deep sadness and all these other things, because trust me, I would not necessarily say this thing your good symptoms that you have a calling exist. It does not exist. You just need to understand, because I always say wait on your ancestors, because imfihlo yesipho sakho will come from idlozi lakho. You can't go to someone and say, what is my gift, when you haven't even done deep or your ancestors are quiet about everything. You need to understand that life is spiritual and everything happens, because some other people, what happened is that they go through an awakening and they decide they have a calling, and then their lives get disrupted, and after lapo nothing makes sense in their life, or you find good after lapo, and you find good you don't have to go down that route, because you went down that route and so intenjalo that you need to understand that you need to not be lazy. Everything is out there. We are here to teach you so that you understand better, because life is spiritual and life is beautiful. Life is energies. And I think once you believe it, understand that everything happens for a reason, because if you say poopa and you're getting, these DMs in your spiritual inbox, it means there's connection. And Butin when and all these other, every now and then you're gonna be taken to the waters, because that is life. Water is life. I don't know why people see snakes and water as something negative, and all of a sudden when you dream that woman and his phone, you listen to this and all of these other things. I always say your ancestors will show you what's about to come, but you'll only get validation when you feel good. I can give a reading, or I can do this to a certain person, or I can heal. That is now when guhluga between someone that's being called or someone that is going through a spiritual awakening, and you need to rediscover yourself, because an awakening, it's just every now. That is why there are numbers, there are symbols. You get to see these ones, these two, all these. That shows you are spiritual people. And every now and then, there's a reset button that is being pushed. And that is when you need to know that I need to realign, or there's certain things I need to lose in my life. That is why we dream. That is why sipahla. That is why sitandaza, because we are spiritual beings. We need to always feed our spiritual lives at all costs. So take this video and listen to it again and listen to it, because I know people that have wasted monies and you come back and you can't even give a single reading, and you can't even do that, because remember, you cannot be taught to be a healer. You are born a healer. What happens when you go for training is the illumination, or rather, they accentuate the healing in your life. You cannot be taught to be a healer. So that's why you find with some people die of depression, because they bengakwazi ukufunda amathambo, bengayazi imithi, or couldn't do this, or I went ngakulo mama ngitshela ukuthi ngumprofit, but when I go to the waters ngiyasaba, and all these, like, it's a lot of things. Let's not be lazy as people. Let us be honest. Sometimes iqiniso liyafuneka. Let us not take everything ngehaba and feed into people's imaginations of what they think it is. Yes, your life is gonna go up and down at some point. Yes, that is practically normal, because you are not of this world, and sometimes you need to lose some things for you to gain some things. But that does not mean because you are broke for a year, it means idlozi lakho is depriving you of money on it. Because that is why you find with some people are like, how do I even go on your twasa? When I'm broke, oh man, does he need to make something for me? No, I'm like, oh, you're just going through an awakening and you're picking the easy way out. So it's one of those things. So make sure we don't get lazy with our spiritual lives. And that's why I need to say, get as much as validation as you can if you really have a gift in your life, because not necessarily everyone is being called. Like, that part of being chosen, guys, that part is deep. Being chosen out of the masses, it's deep. It's not the masses are chosen. Some are being chosen out of the masses to do the work so that they can assist, because siyafana nokuthi siyamasoja thina sikhaphe nina nizophila. That's basically our work. Isn't it? Yeah, that's basically our work. Sikhaphe nina nizophila la emhlabeni so that sizokwazi ukuthi sinilekelele, you can use us. Nisitshela ukuthi ngicela ukufanele ugogo wami and I'm dialing your gogo underground dealing. That is basically our work. So I don't know why people are so obsessed with craving such a commitment, you know, some other things. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I am Thokozani, and if you're still new to the channel, please like and subscribe and leave your comments down below. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I appreciate each and every one of you. Stay humble and love your people and love your ancestors. And remember, life is spiritual and spirituality is freedom. I am Thokozani.